Welcome to all. So good to see you. Welcome, family and fellow peacemakers. Thank you for making time to join us tonight. I know sometimes Sunday creeps up on us and then Wednesday creeps up on us, and here we are. So thank you for being here. As I was looking through my notes in preparation for this evening, I want to thank you all for your comments during our Zoom sessions and for emails and texts and suggestions that might be helpful. I texted Austin Mullen and said, thanks again for Proverbs 18. I said that was powerful. There are a number of things that can help us. You know, if I stay within myself and don't think about anybody else, and I'm going to be always right in my own mind anyway. And he said, well, I just opened Proverbs and there it was. So appreciated God's providential care there, and encourage Austin and Heidi and their little one to always look for that, and for all of us to see God's providential care throughout the day. We are continuing to talk about current issues and things that are going on in our church family specifically, and in our country and our communities. And so this evening, one of the passages that I sent out with the email is Romans chapter 14. And I want to begin by reading a section of that for us tonight. Romans chapter 14, it talks about our liberties as we interact with one another, beginning in verse 1 through verse 21. Except one who is weak in the faith, but not to dispute over doubtful things. For one believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. And as a reminder, part of this context is dealing with the meat that was offered to idols. It seemed to be a real challenge for our first century brothers and sisters. Should I eat it? Should I not? What effect is on it? It has been offered to idol worship, and so this is part of the context. But I believe that we can draw a greater context for our interactions with one another. Begin in verse 2 again. For one believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Let not him who eats despise him who does not eat, and let not him who does not eat judge him who eats, for God has received him. Who are you to judge another's servant? To his own master he stands or falls. Indeed, he will be made to stand, for God is able to make him stand. One person esteems one day above another, another esteems each day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day, observes it to the Lord. He who does not observe the day, to the Lord he does not observe it. He who eats, eats to the Lord, for he gives God thanks. He who does not eat, to the Lord he does not eat, and gives God thanks. For none of us lives to himself, and no one dies to himself. For if we live to the Lord. And if we die to the Lord. Therefore, whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. For to this end Christ died and rose again. Rose and lived again, that he might be Lord of both the dead and the living. But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you show contempt for your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ, for it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then each of us will give an account of himself to God. Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather resolve this, not to put a stumbling block or a cause to fall in our brother's way. I know and am convinced by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing unclean of itself, and to him who considers anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. Yet if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking by love. Do not destroy with your food the one whom Christ died for. Therefore, do not let your good be spoken of as evil. For the kingdom of God is not food and drink, but righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. For we who serve Christ in these things is acceptable to God and approved by men. Therefore, let us pursue the things which make for peace, and the things which one may edify another. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for the man who eats with offense. It is good neither to eat meat, nor drink wine, nor do anything which your brother stumbles, or is offended, or is made weak. As we're talking about our new building, things going on with that, and we began our discussion toward the end of class on Sunday about what it looks like when we return to assembling physically and worshiping together. And then thirdly, dealing with the racial tension that's in our country. And then fourthly, dealing with what does Facebook look like? What is our use of Facebook? What areas should we be more concerned in regard to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and other social media that I only know those names. I don't really know how to use many of them. So, but thinking about that, and what do these verses have to do with these topics in general as we go forward? What's Paul trying to get us to see?
Well, Steve?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Maybe just get a ball rolling. One thing comes out to me is that everything that involves relationships does not necessarily involve issues of right and wrong or sin and lawfulness. That we have to be concerned about even the opinions of our brethren. And because some of these issues that he brings up, the observance of days, there were Jewish days that the Jews would be considered to hold in high esteem that were part of the Jewish law, but then they had a lot of Gentiles at Rome as well, and they might have some of their days, or some of them might have been sinful days based on the practices that went on, but they might have had some secular days that were not sinful, and the Jews would have think, well, what heathens, that they're still doing those. So, but he's saying that as long as it's done to the glory of God, and we're not, I think the assumption is as long as it's not involving overt sin, transgression of the law, then we have to be cautious about I have to be cautious about my brother or my sister's opinion on things that are not a matter of legality. And that stretches us. That, well, you can have your opinion, I can have mine, and, I don't have to worry about your opinion. Well, that's what it says here. I do have to be worried about your opinion if I might cause you to sin based on me being calloused or not careful or conscientious about what your needs are and what your opinions are and your growth level.
Yes, very true. That the more consideration I need to offer to someone else, the more it can diminish the rightness of my opinion, and that you should just accept it because I don't have any bad opinions. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them. And so thinking about this is quite challenging. And please remember that we are using all of our study thus far on being peacemakers as we navigate our relationship with each other. And as John mentioned, especially when it comes to liberties and opinions, then I have to be extra careful. Because what did he say here? If your brother, in verse 15, If your brother is grieved because of your food, or fill in other opinions or views there, you are no longer walking in love. Do not destroy with your food one for whom Christ died. Wow, that's powerful. So we have great influence. We have to offer great care in our interactions with each other and our consideration of each other. Thank you. Anybody else?
Could I make one modification on what I said, please? I had said I'd used the word opinion the whole way through, and I wondered if maybe I shouldn't be saying matters of conscience.
Okay.
I think that is probably a little more accurate. It fits the context a little bit better, because we can have opinions that are very selfishly oriented, or that are, anyway, colors of clothing or furniture or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone would agree is not a matter of sin. But this is dealing with issues where people have a conscience based largely on their background, and it goes into causing someone to violate their conscience or not. So that's a little different than opinion. I probably should not have used opinion throughout that. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that clarification. And notice as we're looking at these, yes, go ahead.
Oh, when you're ready, looks like the McAfee's.
Oh, that's
somebody
fine.
at the McAfee's has a.
Go ahead.
Hello. So this obviously can become an issue if you have this kind of a tyranny of the lowest common denominator, of whichever is easiest to abstain from is the one that ends up being done if you're just kind of going all the way with this. But at the beginning of the chapter, he talks about not only let the one who abstains not despise the one who eats, but also let the one who eats not despise the one who abstains. And so it has to go both ways of not, you can yield to someone out of not wanting to make them offend their conscience, but you also need to educate them on why this is not something that needs to be despised and doesn't need to be something that is looked down on.
Yes, that is an important point. Thank you for making that. That because I abstain from something, I shouldn't look down on you because you see that it's fine, and shouldn't consider myself more spiritual in those regards. And I think that is very key to our discussions on these current topics. Anything else, please?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, John.
I was noticing the contrast. Paul once again tells them what not to do, but he says what to pursue. Pursue the things which make for peace and for the building up of one another, or edifying one another. And of course, that's one of the essential things that we, especially as we gather as a church on the Lord's Day, that we're supposed to be doing, edifying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anything else here?
Steve?
Yes.
I think in this context too, you have those where by looking at the context, you can see that it is, as Joseph referred to, where you have someone who they need to grow and you need to give them time to do that. I think you also see in the days that it isn't always a situation of somebody's stronger, somebody's weaker, and one needs to grow and one doesn't. There are times when there are differing opinions, differing matters of conscience. And I don't see in this scripture that we're supposed to, in those situations, always be trying to change someone's opinion or change their attitude, that what we need to do is look at ourselves and make sure that we aren't developing attitudes, that we aren't forming resentments or whatever, and just let it go and move forward. That we don't have to always agree on everything, and not in every situation is there a stronger and a weaker.
Yes, that's a very good point, Mary. That, in fact, as you were talking, it took me to the next chapter, Romans 15. Beginning in verse 1, it says, "We then who are strong ought to bear with the weaknesses of the weak, not to please ourselves. Let each of us please his neighbor for his good, leading to edification." So, and in one situation, I might be a little stronger, but there are many other situations where I am going to be the weaker and need your understanding. You're lifting me up. You're desiring not to please yourself. And so, yes, that's very important. And God never tells us to put aside, to cast aside those who may be weaker. He always tells us to lift them up. And to Mary's point, not necessarily to change their mind. So thank you. Anything else as we continue our discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Mary.
There are times, like we said, that there are the weaker and the stronger. Am I missing something in the days where am I missing that I don't see in that there being a stronger or a weaker? It's just a difference of conscience. Am I wrong in that?
No, and I think at the beginning, you're talking there in beginning of chapter 14, he who observes the day.
Yeah, some esteem the day, some do not esteem the day.
He goes ahead and then verse 8, if we live to the Lord. If we die to the Lord. Therefore, whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. And then verse 10, but why do you judge your brother? So I think that helps us put that into perspective of somebody may observe a holiday one way and others may abstain. A very practical example is Christmas. Some of us in our church family observe Christmas very differently. In our homes, in our traditions, in our participating, some to a greater degree than others. But I am not to judge because of that, because you honor Christ either way, and I am honoring Christ either way. Does that help a little bit, Mary?
Yeah.
Anybody else have a comment along Mary's question, please? Okay, let's look at our second question of how do we proceed? And we started.
Steve, sorry. It looks like Steve Presume has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Struggling with my phone. This is just regarding the building. And one of the things I think that would be helpful for people to think about is that one of the things we've been doing is working at this in stages. And as we move through these stages, first of all, we have a pretty good team of people, men and women, who are on the committee. So we're getting a lot of, we have a lot of ideas that we can bounce back and forth. And some will see things that others might not, and that becomes very helpful. And as we move through different stages, for example, Pam Blissett will be our go-to person for the resource room and the needs of that resource room. And she'll probably pick people that will help her. And the same thing with like the PA system and those demands. We'll use the guys from the tech team and trying to pick the people that know what they're doing in those particular areas. But the key ingredient is that we really need, when we really value everybody's input and everybody's opinion. It would be tragic to complete things and then have folks come back later and say, I wish you hadn't done it that way. And so we value that input. It means a lot. It helps us to, I guess, find an even keel, find to make decisions that are going to, in the broad scheme of things, are going to be in the best interest of the congregation. And then obviously it has to be scriptural, but just trying to find a level playing ground, I guess, for lack of better words. That's all.
Oh, I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody's comments on Sunday regarding Joe's comment that it's a building. We are the church. And as we keep that in mind, that while offering input and collaborating and working together, that it will be more thought out than if a couple people did it on their own. And so I appreciate the community of experts and ideas and help. But for the rest of us who are not as intimately involved, they've asked for our input. Steve just did again. So please don't hesitate to offer. But as we do that, I need to keep in perspective my opinions, and I don't know what I don't know. And so being appreciative of the final result, however it turns out, and that it will be a glory to God and a benefit for our church family and our community. Thank you, Steve. As we continue on, we started talking about what it looks like when we proceed toward physically meeting in our current building. And I appreciated the comments that were mentioned on Sunday. And Cindy suggested I just ask the general question, what do you think it should look like to get us talking? Rita asked about, well, what about sanitizing and cleaning? Eric Johnson expressed a concern about those who are elderly and who want to make sure to keep everyone safe. And then Ian offered information from the Indiana website about, what is it? The CDC, Cindy says. Thank you. And so as we look toward this, what does it look like to you? What things need to be in place for you to be able to assemble together? And I'll just open it up with that for now. Oh, come on, you've got views on this.
Well, I'll kick us off, Steve, to get us started, but it may, hopefully this doesn't take you in a complete opposite direction. Christine and I were sitting here talking after you asked that, and honestly, I don't care. I just want to know so that I can abide by it, so that I don't accidentally offend somebody. So I have no opinion. I mean, genuinely no opinion. Whatever the elders decide on, what we should and shouldn't do, I'm fine to abide by it. But I'm to the point now where it's like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But to be involved with hashing out the details, I just have no desire to, if that makes sense. So that's a place that we're coming from. Hopefully that didn't offend anybody.
No, I think clarity is the key so that we all do understand. Anybody else have a picture in your mind? Steve?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, comments right now would be extremely helpful because this Friday, Jeff and Gerald and I are going to meet and take the input we received from the members and try to make some sense of it. Something I heard recently was that with this COVID, and as Christians, we should not live in fear. And yet, on the flip side, we shouldn't be cavalier about it. People have died from this. So it's not like it's something that doesn't exist. It's out there. When we think about different attitudes or approaches so far, I know that there are some that are ready to just get back to normal. There are others that have no plans at all of getting out this year. I've been talking to a lot of people who either in the health field in various aspects that would pertain to us, even people in the heating and air conditioning that work in that because of the air filtration and the aerosol effect. And is that going to be dangerous? And one thought that came to my mind that a friend suggested was that we do like the state has and do this in stages so that when we do open up, we'll do a little bit and just see how that goes. And then see how easy it is, because we kind of have three categories. We have those that, like I said, are not planning on meeting this year. We have those that are ready to go back to normal. And then there are those that would like to meet, but it's under certain conditions. And people have different opinions as to what those conditions are. So one of the things that I have wondered is, with all the conditions that some want, is that going to be a distraction from our worship if we do meet at the building? I do wrestle with that. But again, we'll be talking about this Friday and looking at, if we do meet, what kind of things we're going to require. And for some, that might be enough. And for some, that may not. And so for those that would still be reluctant under whatever guidelines we have, at least we're going to keep Zoom going, and people will be able to be fed spiritually and to partake of the Lord's Supper and hopefully through all that be encouraged. So I don't know if that helps any, but it's just it's not an easy decision.
Yeah, it does help a lot, Steve. So thank you. And knowing that it's going to be done in stages and then more opportunities
That's a thought.
to evaluate. Yes, thank you.
Hey,
And
Steve, Shelley has a
yeah, go ahead,
comment
Shelley.
or question. Shelley, if you can unmute yourself.
okay. Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say I definitely do not envy the elders having to make this decision. And it's really hard, I think, for me to be completely objective. But what I will say is, I've been considered high risk now, and I've been encouraged to stay home for as long as possible, which is really hard. I'm tired of it just like everyone else. But on the other hand, in my job, part of my responsibility has been to, you've probably seen that the hospitals have big drive up testing sites. So part of my responsibility has been calling back people and talking with them and giving them the results, finding out how they're feeling. And then I also have meetings every week with some of the area nursing homes and our hospital, the St. Elizabeth Hospital and the Arnett Hospital. And I get the numbers of how many people they have in the hospital that have active COVID cases, how many of their staff are testing positive. And what I have found, and what one of our medical directors told us today on the phone is they think the second wave is coming. It's starting. It's going to be just as bad, if not worse. So far, our area has been pretty lucky, but the test that they are using now, the nasal swab, has about a 70% accuracy rate. So I can't tell you how many people I talk to on a daily basis that have tested negative, that have every symptom and that are so sick. And, our family's been personally affected by it and with the death of my uncle. So it's really hard to think about putting the new babies, the pregnant moms, the elderly, the people with health risks at risk. That being said, it's amazing to me when I speak with some of these nursing homes that have had big outbreaks, some of their patients that you would think would be the first to pass from it, that recover from it. So it's so unpredictable. We just don't know. And I think that's the hardest thing for me, is because, you don't want to live in fear. But it's almost, someone compared it to wearing your seatbelt, I saw recently. We need to obey the laws and protect ourselves to the best of our ability, but not live in fear of this world. So I do not envy the elders making the decisions at all.
Thank you for that, Shelley. I appreciate your knowledgeable perspective. Anyone else?
I'm not 100% sure how valid my opinion is anymore, but down
Always,
here,
yes.
down here, what we've started doing is 2 services. So, depends on what time, but one service is like people who are comfortable with just social distancing, and then the other service is like strictly masks only, like nothing else. And then they record each lesson on Zoom. So I didn't know whether that's been talked about or it's an option, but that's just what's happening here. So.
Okay, so one service, a little more relaxed?
Yeah,
And
I would say so. But I mean, like, we still, like, people stay after, like, there's an order to, like, leaving the building. If you want to socialize, it's always outside. And, like, you can, like, there's a group of people that sanitize and wipe down light switches, the bars in front, and things like that.
okay, thank you, Maddie. So good to see you.
Portage, where I grew up, is doing something very, very similar. So we're only having one service. That's partly just because we're a small group and we have the pew chairs, so we can actually socially distance the pews. My brothers and my dad went in and did that. And so we're meeting, everybody wears masks throughout the service except the little ones. And we've had a shortened service with especially cutting out a lot of the singing. So usually we have only like 3 songs, whereas usually we have a lot more than that. And then as soon as services is over, everybody goes outside in the parking lot for the socializing. So my dad says that, like, we're going to try to keep it under an hour, is the idea that people are not around each other in an enclosed space for more than an hour. Another thing that we've done is use a lot of like door stops and even add into the bathrooms the little like things that you can open the door with your foot, so that people are not touching common spaces as much. So that's another thing that we've done there. So we've been meeting for 4 weeks at least.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. All these ideas help us. Any other thoughts or concerns?
The Hickmans have their hand up.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Hickmans, you're going to have to unmute yourself. I'm not able to on my end.
Hi, Steve. How you doing tonight?
Good.
I do right?
How are you, Mark?
I'm doing speaking as someone who is in the midst of the self quarantine, and not knowing whether or not I have it yet, I can tell you that I have valid and some serious concerns about the gatherings. Not necessarily. I know you can go to all the lengths to prepare, and I love the kids. Anybody who knows me knows I love seeing babies. I love seeing little kids. But we can put all the boundaries and all the guidance in for all the people of age that would listen to it. But when you put 40 little kids in the same room together, that's like there's no way you're going to turn off that energy. And they're going to run around and they're going to play and they're going to talk and they're going to giggle and they're going to have a good time. And that those germs that they could pick up, they may be okay with it, but they're going to pass those to people who are older. And that is and it's not that I don't want to see them. Yeah, please don't think that's not the case. It's just right. I don't see how you're ever going to get a small child to totally understand the dangers, and I don't really want to explain it to them. They shouldn't have to worry about it. But at the same time, it's a serious concern to me to think that someone would have to try and contain their child just because they're trying to save everybody else. And they're going to be touching things and they're going to be grabbing things and they're going to be picking things up and they're going to want to flop around and do things. And it's just what they do. I had 3, I know. But it's not really a question. It's more of an observation and it's a concern. Right. I know, like Shelley said, I don't envy you guys trying to make a decision like this. It's a very hard decision to make. I know everybody's anxious to see each other. I just don't know how it's possible right now to physically be around people with that, and there's no middle ground in this. You're either all in or all out. And I don't see how we can tiptoe around the dangers that are going to be involved with trying to get together.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mark, for expressing your concern. Appreciate that.
Steve Presume has his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Need to unmute yourself, Steve.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Can you? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Just to kind of, this is where opinions would really be helpful. And I guess this is sort of what some would like to see for service. So it would be about an hour. It would only be worship. We wouldn't have Bible classes. So you would come to the building and each family would meet with a deacon. This is not what we're proposing. This is just some things we've heard some other places, what they've done. So when you got to the building, a deacon would meet with you. The doors would be open so you wouldn't touch the doors. A deacon would give you some hand sanitizer. Another deacon would hand you a baggie that would have pre-filled communion. And then a deacon would take you to a particular seat. You would have an assigned seat. In some cases, what they do is the night before, they'll have a sign up and they will only allow so many, and then they can't take any more. Okay. Once you're in the building and in your seat, you're not supposed to be talking to other people, not to hug, especially. In some cases, they prefer that everyone wear masks. Singing would be to just a few songs. And then when the service was over, a deacon would take each family out a certain doorway. And again, in some cases, so there'd be no talking or greeting or shaking hands or anything in the building. In some cases, when you got outside, some are okay with hugging and such, and some would prefer you didn't. And then also it has been recommended at some places that the restrooms are off limits, or they prefer you not use the restrooms. So with that kind of sterile environment, I guess that's where I wonder, is it really that? Is it going to be more of a distraction? Oh boy, my phone's going to shut down.
Are you still there? Sorry, I'm taking notes. So I think we lost you, Steve. But thank you. That's helpful to know. And that's not what any of us are used to. And with this environment, at least I'm able to give you a virtual hug also. Cindy and I, to give a little perspective, would appreciate if everybody wore masks. We are concerned about singing at all and what that might spread. I know in California, the governor put a ban on singing and chanting in worship services, and it solicited all kinds of reactions. Some said it was unconstitutional, and I appreciate whenever Jeff Walker sent out an email from the elders, and I want to read from part of that. This was back in May the 6th. Jeff said, "We recognize that many are anxious to reconvene as soon as possible and worship together in one place. This situation is not, nor has it ever been, about government restricting our religious freedoms. It is about us as part of a greater community trying to look out for the health, safety, and best interest of all. Whether or not we agree with all the government's decisions is irrelevant. We will submit to our governing authorities and follow as we believe Jesus would. As we wrote back in March when explaining our plan to cancel services in response to COVID-19, we realize the response to this decision will be widely varied. Our prayer is that no matter what you think of the decision, you will believe that our intent is to seek the best interests of all and glorify God. We appreciate your patience as we work through this together. In Him, Steve, Gerald, and Jeff." As a response to the governors in California, some people posted that better never happen in Indiana, and Jeff has indicated that we need to be careful. We are alike. And there was a variety of responses, some from in California. Some said it was unconstitutional or unconscionable. Some have not objected and have begun to experiment with kind of like what we do. Andy and his family have songs posted and we all sing together. In California, Judaism stresses that above all else, we should work to preserve health and life. So while a loss for the moment, we know this is a short-term sacrifice for the long-term recovery. And with all of this, as we consider each other, then recognizing that, in my opinion, our religious freedoms have been greatly under consideration in this pandemic, but also recognizing the dangers and the challenges as Mark mentioned, and others have as well. So there's a couple of our concerns. Cleanliness and sanitizing is another one. And so I guess we're in the category of we would consider, but it's going to be hard under certain conditions.
Hey, Steve.
So other thoughts, yes.
I'm going to be very, very careful in my words. So if I offend anybody, please reach out to me directly. I'm not. That is not my purpose. But I just want to be conscious that we have some people who have very strong opinions on both sides. I heard Mark's feelings and his opinion, and Shelley's. I work in the healthcare industry, and I have a pretty strong difference of opinion when it comes to how we have responded to this. And so it's very easy to put people on either side of this kind of issue in a box of, well, if you don't think we should wear a mask and you want to meet already, then you're not caring and you don't care about other people. And then I can take people, well, you want us to wear a mask and you don't want to meet, well, you're just living your life by fear. And I mean, it's real easy to go down either path. But I guess the thing that I want to emphasize, as Steve and the other elders asked for feedback, is there's a good chance that whatever the decision, it's not going to sit well with a lot of us. For instance, if I am very concerned about the virus, no matter what the precautions, I might be upset that we're choosing to meet as early as we might be talking about. On the other side, if I'm not concerned at all about the virus and I go to a meeting that Steve presumed described with, special communion and let's say we wear a mask, I could be upset that, wow, we're opening for this. You see, so it's one of those, and I know that's what we're aiming at, but it's just, I don't want us to take for granted that the truth all lies on one side or the other. It's either you've got to be scared to death of this virus because it's going to kill everybody, and I'm being obviously hyperbolic, or you have to, this virus is a conspiracy theory, blah blah blah. It's not one or the other. And just it really is a sensitive topic, I guess, is my point overall.
Yes, thank you, Andy. And I think you appreciate the careful words that you chose. And all of us,
I've got some thoughts.
I had written down earlier today that, yes, go ahead.
Obviously not a doctor or educated much in this. I've got concerns just like the next person. My opinion maybe on how to handle the people, which we all are, would be to give choice. And I already like the idea where Pastor Presume mentioned Zoom or meeting in person. And maybe there are more options than just that. For example, not being confined to a space. Maybe our assembly could be more than just the four walls and within there. If there are folks that are just comfortable staying at home, maybe that's an option. Maybe there are folks that are comfortable coming to the parking lot, and that's an option. Maybe there are folks that are comfortable inside the building, and that's an option. But being able to self-select, I think, would perhaps help us avoid of disunity or choosing sides or whatever. I have no idea what the assembly was like in Acts 2, where there's 3,000 people there. Surely it wasn't inside a building. So I think there's a lot of things that we could be doing that would still be clear for a conscience sake. And personally, there's a lot of land there, so perhaps some stations outside. I would like to see people in person, but I may not want to sit within 6 feet of somebody. That could be an opinion. I don't know, but just to throw out another brainstorming idea that maybe meeting but not being inside could be an option. I don't know. So I really like the idea of self-selecting, though, being able to choose, I'm going to do this because I'm comfortable with this, or I'm not, or whatever. But obviously I want to meet with brethren, and I want to have their conscience in mind, because I would like to give up something if it were to cause them to stumble. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Steve?
Appreciate that attitude. Yes. Cindy's waving to me. I'm 1 minute over. So last comment, please. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. No, I could just that what we've been talking about, this is a very emotional and very difficult, and watching these men try to, and as we've talked about, for example, the children, if the leaving the building is done in an orderly manner, then you may have children out in the parking lot who their family is fine with them interacting with each other. And you can have people who they're not comfortable with that and they choose to go straight to their cars. And I mean, that's the scriptures that we were using today is just that. Don't look at those kids that are playing and think, well, their parents just don't care. They don't realize. Don't look at the ones who are feeling like they need to get in the car. That's fine. That's where they are. And just that, I mean, you know, when you're talking even options now, even if we're not at the building, we're allowed to get together in larger groups. You can get groups that all feel we need this stringent and they can all get together and follow that. You can have groups that don't feel that that's necessary. And when we see each other on Zoom, we don't have to have an opinion about that. We can be thankful that we're seeing our brothers and sisters. And I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. I'll just stop now.
Amen to all that, Mary. Thank you. In fact, I've been thinking about that this afternoon, that as we each make choices, that it is not a matter of somebody's stronger faith over someone else, just like Romans 14 and 15 talk about. It is, and I appreciate all three of Jerry, Jeff, and Steve saying that whatever we decide, there may be some that are not comfortable with that, and they understand that. And so whatever the parameters are, we each make our choice. We either choose to go and do it as unto the Lord, or we may choose to stay home and do that as unto the Lord. Because whether we live or whether we die, we do it unto the Lord. Wow, I didn't know you set that up so well, Mary. Thank you. And so let's keep doing that. We will continue this study on Sunday and Wednesday and talk about the other two questions. They're too important and they apply to our study so specifically and intimately. So Sunday, we will continue talking about this if you have other observations and comments. And then we will start addressing the idea of racism in our country and the volatility and the many facets of that as well. Love you all so much. Thank you for your help tonight. Hope it has helped our elders in gaining some more information. But let's keep praying for them and for each other. Love you all. Steve out.